An abduction of two women in London on the 25th of April, the MPS launched an urgent investigation. We issued a series of detailed public appeals, offered a £20,000 reward to trace 34-year-old Joseph McCann.
Described as a coward, violent bully and a paedophile, Joseph McCann was found hiding up a tree after a short but horrific campaign of kidnap and rape.
Joseph McCann, born on February 8, 1985, in London, England, embarked on a life of crime at an alarmingly young age. His family relocated to a council estate in Manchester during his childhood, coinciding with the onset of his criminal inclinations. By just 11 years old, he had his first encounter with law enforcement, and by 13, he faced his first conviction for theft. He and his two brothers instilled such fear in the community that after countless complaints, the council finally ousted the family in 1998. As he aged, his rap sheet grew, encompassing knife possession, vandalism, and trafficking stolen merchandise. He ignited cars and terrorized both the young and the elderly. Despite moving away, the brothers frequently returned to their old council estates, igniting chaos that both the press and locals dubbed a reign of terror. It wasn't long before each brother received an anti-social behavior order, ASBO, marking them among the UK's earliest to be sanctioned with this measure. The order prohibited them from setting foot in the Beswick area and engaging in any form of abusive or antisocial conduct in Manchester. However, this seemed ineffective as the boys were seen laughing and cursing at the crowd upon leaving court. Interestingly, crime in Beswick dropped by a third, and a local supermarket reported a £14,000 increase in revenue following the issuance of the ASBO against them. Their lawyer argued that the ASBOs violated their human rights, leading to 3 separate appeals. These efforts culminated in a 2001 hearing at the Court of Appeal, which ultimately rejected their case. In 1999, the McCann family relocated once more, this time leaving the Manchester area behind. They relocated to southern England, where the brothers persisted in their illicit pursuits. By 2007, Joseph had settled in Bedford. Although he had recently become a father, he missed the birth and was absent from his child's life as he was serving time in prison. He gained his freedom that year, only to be apprehended once more on December 27th for breaking into an 85-year-old's home and making threats with a knife. Luckily, the elderly man had CCTV, which led to the intruder's quick capture and re-imprisonment in September 2008. He received an IPP, imprisonment for public protection sentence, requiring him to serve at least 2 years and 6 months behind bars. His imprisonment for public protection, IPP, was an indefinite sentence requiring the Parole Board for England and Wales to assess his risk to society before any potential release. Upon release, he would be under a 10-year supervision period. Any criminal activity during this time would result in his immediate return to prison. Throughout his incarceration, numerous professionals and offender managers voiced serious concerns about his ongoing threat to public safety. A report indicated that he posed a serious threat to the public and known adults, and presented a moderate risk to children, prison staff, and inmates. Additionally, there were concerns that he could be a significant danger to teenage girls, with indications of a desire to sexually exploit them. Based on the professional's assessment, his numerous appeals for release were rejected, resulting in him spending over 8 years behind bars. During Joseph's incarceration, his brother Sean was also behind bars at HMP Peterborough, serving a 2-year sentence for assault. Tragically, Sean ended his own life while in prison. Joseph, on the other hand, immersed himself in various rehabilitation programs and earned his release on license in March 2017. Upon release, he returned to Buckinghamshire to stay with family, but soon vanished off the grid. His sudden disappearance left his offender manager unable to monitor his whereabouts. Despite his lengthy imprisonment, it didn't dissuade him, and his criminal activities continued unabated. A few months later, he found himself back in custody, serving an additional 2-year stint. During sentencing, the judge declared it concurrent with his IPP term, yet his offender management team failed to activate that recall. Had they taken action, he would have faced the parole board once more before any chance of release. Sadly, this oversight allowed him to be freed halfway through his sentence. Concerned prison staff alerted probation services about the discrepancy between his sentence and his IPP, highlighting their unease. They believed he remained a clear and present danger to society. Nevertheless, in 2019, he was released without a parole board hearing. He then roamed the country, skillfully dodging all efforts by his offender management team to track him down. On April 21, 2019, his criminal activities escalated to a terrifying new level. In the early hours of the morning, around 3:30 a.m., he seized a 21-year-old woman at knife point while she returned from a nightclub. He then took her to an undisclosed location and committed a heinous act of sexual assault. Though he claimed to be Joel McCann, Hertfordshire police identified him the following morning but couldn't track him down. Merely 4 days later, he kidnapped another woman in northeast London, subjecting her to a terrifying 14-hour ordeal of sexual assault. He was seen casually stopping at a drive-thru with the frightened woman in the back seat. She remained in his car when he held another woman at knife point and forced her inside. While drinking bottles of vodka, he drove to Watford with the women and tried to check into a hotel. When his attempt failed, one of the women shattered a vodka bottle over his head, enabling their escape. Investigators compiled a list of suspects from past crimes, but McCann, having no prior sex offenses, was excluded. It took over a week to connect these cases to the April 21st attack. Afterwards, a nationwide manhunt ensued to capture Joseph McCann, with a £20,000 reward offered for information.
For an abduction of 2 women in London on the 25th of April, the MPS launched an urgent investigation. We issued a series of detailed public appeals, offered a £20,000 reward to trace 34-year-old Joseph McCann.
On May 5th, McCann resurfaced in Manchester, where he charmed a woman at a bar into inviting him to her home. Upon reaching her home, he bound her and assaulted both her 17-year-old daughter and 11-year-old son. The daughter managed to flee through a window and sought help. But by the time police and neighbors arrived at 8 a.m., Joseph had vanished. Around 1 p.m. that same day, a suspect was apprehended, but it wasn't Joseph McCann. While officers questioned the wrong individual, McCann had already moved on and driven to Bury. In the early afternoon, around 1:30 p.m., he forcefully seized a 71-year-old woman outside a Morrison's supermarket. After assaulting and raping her, he took her car. With the elderly woman still in the vehicle, he then targeted and abducted a 13-year-old girl. She also fell victim to sexual assault. The duo managed to break free at a service station later that afternoon, but Joseph continued his rampage in the victim's car. That same evening, around 6:30 p.m. in Cheshire, he compelled 2 14-year-old girls into the vehicle and menaced them with death threats. He was spotted heading to a gas station to purchase a packet of condoms. Though not visible, the 2 girls were in the back seat. He was on a perilous and unsettling spree. Driven by cocaine and vodka, Joseph McCann showed no signs of stopping, with no boundaries to his heinous acts. He had become the nation's most wanted man. Yet at this critical juncture, the police finally closed in on him. They caught sight of him in his car with 2 girls in the back seat and initiated a pursuit.
8-6, urgent.
McCann collided with a Mercedes before taking off on foot. Thankfully, the 2 girls emerged unscathed, though deeply rattled. In an unexpected series of events, he first fled on foot, then snagged a bike to make his getaway. Not long after, he ditched the bike and hailed a taxi around 8:15 p.m. Meanwhile, roadblocks were being established and the police were closing in on Joseph McCann. Yet, Cheshire Constabulary didn't alert the public of his presence in the area until 8:45 p.m. An officer, unaware of who he was speaking to, stopped the taxi and chatted with McCann, who was calmly holding a pint glass, claiming he was on his way home from the pub. The officer had a visual on McCann and anticipated a distinct tattoo on his stomach to confirm his identity. When asked to lift his shirt, McCann unleashed a barrage of insults and bolted from the taxi. Following nearly 9 hours of relentless pursuit by car, on foot, and with helicopter support, Joseph McCann was finally discovered at 2:36 a.m., May 6, concealed high in a tree along a secluded country lane. Following an intense standoff with negotiators, he was ultimately apprehended and taken into custody. Mocking the authorities, he remarked that if they had nabbed him after the first two incidents, everything else could have been avoided. He further asserted that the young girls found in his car had simply asked for a ride, and he was merely offering them assistance. He pleaded not guilty to all charges involving the 11 women and children. On December 6 of that year, he appeared via video from Belmarsh Prison at Old Bailey in London, with Mr. Justice Adas presiding. McCann declined to appear in court, citing sleep deprivation and physical inability. His actions demonstrated a blatant disregard for the justice system and a complete lack of remorse for his victims. Ultimately, he was tried and found guilty on all counts, a staggering total of 37 offenses. The jury commended the victims for their remarkable bravery in coming forward. Joseph McCann received 33 life sentences, ensuring he will spend at least 40 years behind bars for his atrocious crimes. The judge labeled him a quintessential psychopath, and his unprecedented spree of violence and horror was heavily condemned. For 15 days, the police suspected that he eluded capture by donning multiple disguises, switching vehicles, and using fake identities. Protected by a network of accomplices, 6 individuals were detained for aiding him. Joseph McCann's horrifying and vile actions left a trail of devastation, inciting public outrage. People were baffled by his release from prison, despite his IPP sentence seemingly overlooked. According to BBC News, the National Probation Service failed to adhere to proper protocols. After his 2017 arrest, he should have faced the parole board, which likely would have denied his release, keeping him behind bars. The Ministry of Justice delved into the mishandling of Joseph McCann within the criminal justice system. In an uncommon move, they made their findings public. The review revealed that the National Probation Service failed to manage McCann properly, deviating from the established policies and procedures designed for handling high-risk offenders.
This is a very concerning case. This was a dreadful, dreadful set of offences. And in this case, I think there was clearly an individual error. McCann should have been referred to the parole board after he'd committed further offences. I'm very confident that in those circumstances, the parole board wouldn't have re-released him.
They discovered that his individual management lacked consistency, plagued by frequent staff changes and hastily transferred files. Some reports blamed NPS budget cuts and staff shortages. Following an internal probe, one employee faced a demotion. Harry Fletcher, once the Assistant General Secretary of the Probation Officers Union, highlighted a startling parliamentary revelation. Each week, an individual is mistakenly released. The repercussions of such errors have never been more catastrophic.